we're going to get into this climate change rally debate. Just talking about the snow season during the break. It's been extended here in Australia, one of the longest ever, even though it's a drought, of course. Most people doing it hard on the eastern seaboard. Sarah, what puzzles me about the way these climate rallies are treated? All right, they're big news. When you get that many people at a protest, it's big news. But the premise for the protests are completely incorrect, and no one in the media seems to point that out. Very few, you know, the premise is that Australia's not taking action and has to take action. Well, hang on a second. Why are our power bills so high? Why have we got renewable energy targets? Why have we signed up to Paris? And also the extreme alarmism, saying, you know, like in 10 years we're all going to be cooked, the whole planet's finished. Shouldn't there be some rational facts chucked into the debate, not just by the protesters and their political supporters, but also by the media?
I can kind of see how that can be perceived, especially with some of the alarmism. But I do think that it's a debate that needs to be had, and there are going to be extremes of either side of the debate. So there is going to be some really extreme rhetoric about, you know, the world coming to an end, and on the other side, people saying that, you know, everything's fine and climate change doesn't exist. I think it's really important to have all that aired, and when there is so many people on one side, it's important to cover exactly, you know, what are you saying, what do you want? Yeah, what are you doing as someone in the media?
But I heard that mentioned so many times. There's so many people here. It's people power. There's a mood for change. Yeah. Hang on a second. We had a federal election only 4 months ago, and one side was promising a radically different approach on climate change, and they lost. So I think the people power has spoken.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, in terms of who had the strongest climate policy, I'm not sure if all of these people see it you know, as this very hard and fast, you just have to lobby whatever government's in power. It is a social media thing. It's a stunt for the whole world to see this is where we're at. I still think it's a pretty legit way to show exactly how you feel about an issue. I'm not really, against reporting on what they say and what they're doing. I think it still needs to be heard. Yeah,
I think it's got to be heard. I just think we've got to have some facts chucked into it. I saw one little factoid that was corrected by a reporter. Here's Channel 10. Channel 10's Hugh Riminton. He does ABC stuff and whatever, and he does this reporting for 10, and he interviewed these couple of little fellows. Interesting to hear what they're protesting about. A funny exchange, but illustrative in many ways.
We want to protest against ScoMo and Adani coal. Yeah, because we don't like ScoMo and we want him out of the industry.
He's not in the industry, he's the Prime Minister.
Yeah, the Prime Minister industry.
Hilarious stuff. But, I mean, Rebecca, they hate ScoMo and they hate Adani, and they're 11. I mean, honestly, is it worth running this stuff in the media?
Well, you know, I actually think it tells you a lot about the calibre. Well, it tells you what the dialogue that they're hearing around them. It also tells you how shallow, in fact, the hysteria, at least the arguments are. I mean, what we also see is a huge amount of mass hysteria, it seems to me. If you want real reductions, deeper reductions, we could do it with far less pain on our electricity bill. Number one, end all the moratoriums on gas. I notice that states like Victoria that have a moratorium are quite happy to use gas that's been mined up in Queensland. So they have a NIMBY problem. They don't have a problem with gas. As soon as we bring down the price of gas because we actually develop, and we have a huge amount of it in this country, gas has half the emissions of coal. And in the United States, where that's been done, that's the country on the planet that has reduced emissions more than any other. So, yes, it is about time we sort of took some real action by not ruling out lower emission fossil fuels, for example.
I think this debate's been going on for so many years, Stephen. I mean, you're in government dealing with this in a policy sense. You know, there's all sorts of scientific, economic, social issues to be addressed for a sensible approach here and around the world. And yet, you know, almost 2 decades on, we're reduced to just running kids saying get rid of the Prime Minister or stop a coal mine. What's happened to the intellectual left?
Well, I think the point that you've made just a few moments ago, Chris, goes to the heart of this. There was recently a very large poll about what people thought on many issues, but this was one of the central issues. And the combined Labor-Green vote right across the country was about 43, 42%. And the rest voted for parties and candidates that were strongly pro-development, strongly pro-jobs and strongly pro-growth. And I think that while it's great to see people being active, expressing their view in the streets, that's a worthy thing. For people to try and then take that and say, well, that represents some sort of majority view across the country, they are deluding themselves. There has been an overwhelming pushback on the climate issue, if you want to look at it in that election terms. And it was one of the central debates in the election. Yes, there was important economic issues as well, but probably the next rung of issues were the climate change issues. Yep. And they have been resoundingly rejected, and especially in Queensland, where the combined vote of the left and the Greens and Labor is about 35%, which is about 65% of people wanted to see Adani developed.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at all the media of this, of course, but I had a look at some reports on the ABC, Channel 10 and Channel 9. And they don't mention what these people actually want, what the demands are. Hugh Rimmington on 10 did. He mentioned that if they got their way, they'd cost the country $100 billion a year. But none of them mentioned the fact that the election had already sort of decided these issues, or the fact that Australia's already doing an enormous amount when it comes to climate action. It was signed up to Paris, and a lot of people disagree with that. So, anyway, it's fascinating to watch the way this plays out, because it isn't getting any smarter. In fact, have a look at Greta Thunberg, of course, but a global superstar now, some teenage kid telling the people around the world that apparently the world's going to end and we've got to do something, anything.
Millions of people across the globe marched and demanded real climate action, especially young people. We showed that we are united and that we, young people, are unstoppable.
Yes, they're unstoppable. There we go.